Welcome back to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to discuss about the function overloading. So before I tell you about the function overloading, let me create a project first. So as you know that in the previous video, in the previous lecture, we have already discussed like how to use the Visual Studio 2019, how to create the project. So the same way I'm just going to use this Visual Studio 2019 for explaining the concept related to the function overloading. So let me first create a new project. So here if I'm selecting it, then I can see console application in C++. I will select an empty project and then I will do the next, give the name as CPP course or CPP learning, course learning. This will be the name so that I can utilize this project till the end. I'm just going to create it. So once I create it, you will be able to see a default file which will be there. So we will be using that file here for writing our code. Okay, so this will come up. Taking some time, so need to keep patience. So, okay, I have created an empty project, so I will just add a new source file here. Okay, so I will add a new item, and what new item you need to add? You need to add a CPP file. You can give the name as source.cpp or function overloading. Let me give a common name, CPP concepts, so that every time I can use the same file. Okay, so cpp concepts.cpp, I'm just going to add it. So once I add it, you will be able to see this cpp concept.cpp here. And here I'm just going to add the hash include. Let me just make a bigger font. Hash include IO stream. We have just discussed in the previous video about this. And then using namespace std. And then let me write the function int main and return 0. So this is the basic framework of your program. This is how you write your C++ program. So I'm just going to tell you about the function overloading in today's video. What is the function overloading? So function overloading is nothing but one function name used for creating many or for defining basically many other functions. Okay. So let me give you an example. So in C language, if you write some function like this, void sum int a int b, and then if you write the same function with different type of arguments like int a, float a and then float b, then in that case, if you do this, then if it was a C file, then in that case, if you compile it, you will see some error. Okay, you will be able to see an error that these are the duplicates. This sum is already defined. Okay, so if you want to see this, let me show you by creating it at some other place. So let me just create it in the C drive in this Vikash folder. Okay, let me just have some. Okay, so here is the projects. So let me just add one folder here, C samples. Okay, so let me open this folder and let me create one C file here. Okay, so I'm just going to create a C file and the name I can put like sample.c so that it can be used as a C file. And let me just add the code for C language. Okay, so let me copy and paste it from here. Let me write like this, main function, and let me add this here. Okay, so this is basically a C code. Okay, C language code, and I don't need to include hash include stdio.h and anything until I'm using any of the functions which have been declared in stdio.h. This thing we have already discussed, that you don't need the header files to include to compile your code. Okay, and that will work only when you are not using any of the functions that have been declared in stdio.h or in the header files. Okay, so let me save it and let me try to compile it. I have saved it, and now I will open Visual Studio command prompt. So this is the command prompt. Let me open this, and in this command prompt I will open this particular path. I will reach till this particular path, and then I will try to run this cl sample.c. Okay, so you can see that void sum int already has a body. So in case of C language, you cannot define two functions with the same name. Okay, but here if you see, I have declared two functions with the same name, but one function is working on the integer type of data, and the other function is working on the a float type of data. And if I try to compile it, if I just right click it and do the compile, you won't be able to see any issues with this. Okay, you can see this is succeeded. So in C++, you can define two functions with the same name, but the only thing is that they should not be same in all respect. All respect means only the respect with respect to the number of arguments or the type of the arguments. Okay, so suppose this is the first case where two arguments differ. Okay, so you can write the functions with the different name only. There are three conditions. First condition is like names are same, but type of arguments are different, and number of arguments are same. You can see that the number of arguments is 2 here, number of arguments again 2 here, but they differ. Okay, even if you write like this, then also it will work fine. So I hope you are getting the point here. So let me just compile it, and if I compile it again, it will work fine. But if they are same in all respects, okay, if I do like int a, int b, even if I change the name a1 and b1, it only worries about the type and the number of arguments. So if the type are exactly same, no matter if their names are different, the types are exactly same and the number of arguments are also the same, then in that case what will happen? Will you be able to compile it in C++? The answer is no. In that case, it will give you the error. It will say void function int already has a body. So what you can understand from here, that in C++ language, declare two functions with the same name if both of them are different in terms of their number of arguments or the type of arguments. Okay, so even if the types are same, second condition you can see, if types are same but number of arguments are different, then also it will work. Okay, so you can see like if I do like int a1, int b1, int c. Okay, so number of argument again differ, right? So in this case, what will happen, that if I compile it, it will successfully compiled. Okay, so the type of arguments or the number of arguments, if they differ, then this will work. Okay, but let me tell you one thing, that compiler itself finds out a way to identify these functions uniquely. Okay, for you it's like sum, both the functions have the same name sum, but in reality what happens that behind the scene when the compiler is compiling these functions, what they do, they generate the function names for these functions. For example, for this function, which is the first function written here having two arguments, you can see that int a, int b, which means 4 bytes and 4 bytes, total 8 bytes this function is accepting as the input argument. So compiler will generate, for example, like this, sum at the rate 8. Okay. So it's not like same will be generated. I'm just telling you the logic behind how it generates based on the arguments. It calculates the number of arguments, their types, and based on the types, it adds all the bytes which its arguments take and then just write like this, sum at the rate 8. Apart from that, there can be something before this, there can be something after this. Okay, so all that can happen. So it will be sum at the rate 8, and now you can understand what it will be. It will be something like sum at the rate 12. Okay, so if you see this sum at the rate 8 and sum at the rate 12, they both differs. So this is how compiler itself finds out like how the two functions differ, and ultimately behind the scene C++ is also maintaining the unique name for the functions. But they have provided us this particular thing so that we can use this. This basically gives you the facility to, write two different functions with the same name, but because the purpose is same. But the thing is that just like this is the perfect example. There's some function we want to work on the integer, and the same some function we want to work on the integer for the three arguments, or we want to work it for the for different number of arguments. Okay, or different types of arguments. So this is how it maintains the different names, the C++ compiler, and this particular mechanism using which it gives the different names to the functions. This is known as the coloring of the functions, or you can say name mangling for the functions. Okay, so name mangling is the concept using which the different functions with same name can be defined in C++. One more thing you need to remember, that if you think that return type also plays a role, like just like here, the return type is void. Okay, the return type is void. If you want, like, you want to give the same number of arguments, same type of arguments, and you think that by giving the different type here, like rather than void, if you want to give int, and if you think that it will work fine, then in that case you are wrong, because the return type doesn't play any role for the name mangling. So if I do this, compile, then you will be able to see again a problem. Okay, so you can see like int sum overloaded function differs only by return type from void sum, so this will not accept. Okay, return types doesn't play any role in the function overloading. Okay, defining the same functions in different forms, or you can say defining different functions with the same name, is known as the name mangling or the function overloading in C++. Okay, so the third point that you need to remember always is they don't differ by name, by return type. They only take care about the type of the function, sorry, type of the arguments and number of arguments. Okay, so they only worry about the number of arguments or the type of the arguments, nothing else. So this is what name mangling is. Okay, and this is what the function overloading is. So in the earlier videos, we have discussed about the polymorphism. Okay, polymorphism. So If we discuss about the polymorphism, if you remember about the polymorphism, then you must remember that the meaning of polymorphism was like one thing in many forms. And we discussed two types of polymorphism, static, and the second one was dynamic. Okay. So in case of static, the call to a function resolved at compile time. I mean, when you are compiling the code, you know that what function will be called. Like here, if you like write like this in C, you don't need to do anything. If you are calling like this, sum 10, 12, and 13, in that case, at the compile time, when you have written your program, even before you compile, you know that which version you are going to call. Okay. So this is called the static polymorphism. So if someone asks you that is function overloading is also a kind of polymorphism, then the answer will be yes. The function overloading is also a kind of polymorphism, and that is known as the static polymorphism. Okay. In case of dynamic polymorphism, when we will discuss about the virtual functions, then we will understand about this dynamic polymorphism. Dynamic polymorphism means at the compile time you don't know which function will be called. For example, you have created an object of vehicle, okay, and you think that you want to use at runtime you decide that what kind of vehicle you want to use, whether you want to use the car or whether you want to use the motorbike, whatever object you want to create, that you decide at the runtime. Since you decide the object creation in case of dynamic polymorphism at the runtime, hence you also decide the version of the function which need to be called at the runtime, and that is known as the dynamic polymorphism. Okay, so that is some other concept that we will discuss when we will discuss about the virtual functions and the dynamic polymorphism concepts way ahead in this course. Okay, so this is all about the function overloading that I wanted to tell you, and you can practice about these function overloading and all these things. You can see like what happens with this, how the function overloading is performed, how you can write the two different functions with the same name to achieve the same kind of results, because this function overloading has been introduced because of that reason only. We just discussed like if you want to perform the sum on integer variables as well, you want to perform the sum on the float or double variables as well, you want to perform this sum on the some other kind of variable like strings. Suppose you want to add two strings, string 1 and string 2, which is a character pointer basically, character array basically. So if you want to perform the sum for the different type of data types, then in that case you can write your functions with the same name, because the same name makes sense, right? If you want to perform the sum on the float, then you will write like this, float b, and it will be like float a. And then if you want to perform the sum on the two strings, then you can write like void sum and characteristic str1. You can write like char asterisk a, char asterisk b. Okay, basically it should be const char asterisk. It should also be const char asterisk. Okay, and you can again do perform the task here. Okay, so let me just compile it. So if you compile it, no overloaded function takes three arguments, because I wrote like this, so that is why it is giving error. Let me remove this, and now it will be fine when I will compile it. Okay, so it's all basically like the type of argument and the number of arguments. Okay, so here you can see like if you see the pointer variable also takes 4 bytes. So if you see, then you can think like sum at the rate 8 should be the function name here. But I told you that apart from the name type and the number of byte it takes, it has something else which it adds in the beginning at the end based on the type of the argument or some other parameters as well. So if your types differ, even if the number of bytes it takes are same, then also it has a mechanism based on the type of the variable to generate a unique name. So don't ever think that C++ is going to use the same name. It is only for you. You can write the different functions with the same name, but C++ language, the compiler of C++ language is going to convert it into a unique name behind the scene without letting you know. Okay, so that is all the task of compiler with respect to the name mangling or the function overloading. And the same thing cannot be performed in C language that we have just saw. Okay, so this is all about for this video for today's video. In the next video, we will discuss about the you know uh, default arguments of the functions. That is also a feature with C++ which is not available with C language. Okay, and apart from the functions, we are also going to discuss what are basically the functions, what are the different components of the function. Basically, in this course, I'm trying to cover as much information as possible for you to become, you know, to become a person who has a good knowledge, a deep knowledge in C++ language. Okay, at the beginner and the moderate level. So even if you are learning it at the beginner or moderate level, you are somewhat more than that, somewhere between moderate to expert level. Okay. So with this, I'm just going to end this lecture and we'll meet in the next lecture. You can visit the next lecture and you can understand the concept related to the function, default arguments of the functions that we are going to discuss.